Welcome back to another In Swine Versation. Kemin hosted a feed safety forum in June that focused on the latest feed biosecurity research. Today, Dillon Mellick, Technical Service Manager from Kemin Pathogen Control Team, joins us to dive into the topic a little bit more. Welcome, Dillon.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the Feed Safety Forum and Kemin's goal for the event?
Yeah, so it's an event that was actually that we've done a couple years now. And so really the goal is to bring some thought leaders in this space of feed biosecurity, get some people together, kind of let them share some information, some newer research that they might have, and then also hopefully kind of have a little bit of two-way dialogue as well. So hopefully if there's new areas, some gaps in research that we can kind of focus on maybe what's next in this part of the world. And so we had a few different groups. We had some individuals from University of Minnesota who talked about their African swine fever surrogate virus assay. We had some individuals from Kansas State talk about feed mill biosecurity. Pipestone spoke a little bit about some different topics around domestic and foreign animal disease and their experiences with mitigants. And then also Iowa State kind of spoke on some partnered research that we have done with them.
Sounds really diverse, and this was the second year, right?
Correct. Yep, this was the second year.
Recently, Kemin also completed some research in partnership with Iowa State University regarding the long-term impact of feeding Salcur. So it's one of Kemin's flagship products on key sow performance metrics. Can you tell us about Salcur and why this research is important, Dillon?
Yeah, so the Salcur product, of course, fits into kind of that mitigant category. It's an antimicrobial that we've had for quite a few years, have been used a lot in the poultry industry for salmonella control. Before 2013, with PDV and the concern ramping up on feed biosecurity, it wasn't used a lot in the swine industry. So we've done a lot of work looking at how do we formulate with a chemical mitigant and what that kind of looks like from animal performance. But one of the key questions that kind of keeps coming back up is how about long term, and what we can really see from performance effects long term. So we, as you mentioned, we partnered with Iowa State University and looked at kind of partnering also with a few production systems that have used the product for quite a few years, and looking at some time before the usage of the product, when the product got used, and then looking at their data from a time period after the product was used. And so that looked at represent about 550,000 sows per year for those systems. So quite a few numbers of animals, and looked at some of the, as you mentioned, some of the performance metrics and health metrics, things such as sow mortality, piglet mortality, number born alive, and basically dove into all that production data and looked to see, was there any effect? And really the outcome of it was that we did not see any negative effects of using the chemical mitigant on those sow health and performance metrics.
So let's get some other details. I know I did an interview with Scott D about feed biosecurity. Now, I wanted to get some more of your take on it. So can you discuss the role of feed and feed ingredients in biosecurity overall?
Yeah, so Dr. D he's been tremendous in kind of sharing some of his knowledge and doing a lot of research in that kind of space. And so I would say feed ingredients are definitely a risk, and it's been well documented that transmission of disease can happen through that. It's not the only risk, but it is one of the risks. We like to say it's a piece of the puzzle, right? So there's a lot of different ways that disease can be transmitted, and feed is one of those risks. It's also something we have kind of an influence over, right? It's something that we can control. We have kind of a direct influence over. It's not something like a migratory bird, something of that nature that we don't necessarily have that kind of influence on.
So you touched right on the point there. It's a proven transmission route for diseases that are detrimental to animal health and welfare, and ultimately the producer's bottom line. Do you feel like it's being well addressed in the industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's something that's starting to be better addressed. I would say there's definitely some challenges that go along with it, right? When we look about feed biosecurity in the swine industry, it's something that wasn't really as high on producers' minds before PDV. And you look at kind of our feed delivery systems, the way feed mills are designed, things were kind of, most of that was built before that time period. So there's a lot of challenges that go along with that. Feed mills aren't necessarily built to kind of handle biosecurity as well. So I think it's something that people are starting to do, putting some things in place to be able to kind of handle that with either some small practical things or some large scale things. I think some of the stuff with like responsible importing of ingredients and stuff of that nature are good steps that the industry is making to try to really close that gap.
A few more questions, Dillon. Can you talk about what research might be on the horizon? What's next in the feed safety space in terms of education and solutions?
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of research on feed specifically, right? And feed ingredients and stuff such as holding times, stuff such as chemical mitigants. There's been a lot of research in that realm. I think kind of the next step is looking at that whole feed delivery system. And so feed mill biosecurity, what happens if you get a feed mill contamination? How do you clean that up? And so that's kind of the next route that I think a lot of people are starting to look at, and where a lot of research is going, and something that we're kind of focusing on and looking at is what solutions that are out there to potentially help on things such as those.
So you've got lots of solutions. What if people are looking for resources where they can go and get more information?
Yeah, so we have a couple different landing spots and websites that kind of contain some of this information. And so the first one would be kemin.com/pathogen control. And then the second one would be kemin.com/feed safety forum, with the second one having a lot of that information from kind of that first topic we discussed on the feed safety forum.
Dillon Mellick, thank you for joining us to recap the Kemin Safety Forum.
Thank you for having me.